Well, Joe's going to get a question not teaching tonight. Anyway, tonight we have a special guest teacher. We'll see you in this. So make sure you listen, pay attention, and hear what he has for you. Yeah.
Forget my people. Hotness Express coming through. How are you guys tonight? Good. Okay, all right. Not good?
Good.
I heard one good. That's good enough for me. Goodness, okay, we're here, everybody. I am so excited to get to do this tonight. So anxious, always, but very excited to get to talk to you guys tonight about what we have. What I have here tonight is love the outsider. And so we're going to talk about what that means, how we do that, why we do that. But first, because I love to tell stories, and I very much enjoy hearing stories also, I want to tell you one of a time where I felt like an outsider. So Haiti, the country of Haiti, I have been there 3 times on mission trips. Also have a little sister who's adopted from there. You've probably heard her name before. Or seen her. Showed up. But I've been to Haiti 3 times on a mission trip, and each time is always such an impactful and exciting time, but also really makes you feel like an outsider when you go to a foreign third world country from America. But the time that I really felt like an outsider, I have just some pictures of when I was in Haiti. The time that I really felt like an outsider was the most recent trip that I was there, and I say recent, it was in 2017. But we went to visit a women's prison in Haiti. Now, already, I'm a little anxious because it's a prison. Feeling like an outsider because I've never been to prison. Again, feeling like an outsider because it's a women's prison, not a woman, so probably wouldn't get put in there. Walls and windows floor. But we go in and there's armed guards with giant guns and like, you know, it must be like defending something. And like I'm like, okay, so we're probably gonna go in with armed guards and everything. No, we went in with like one tour guide. It was like a tour guide, like we were at a museum or something. Like this person didn't even have a gun. They're like, come on in, we're gonna go on inside. You might as well just throw us in the lines then and we'll do that story. Like, so we head in and I'm just like terrified, like totally out of my comfort zone, feeling alone, lost. And we head up to this floor, and what was a little sad about it is, unlike here in the United States, we might have like 1 or 2 people to a cell. They had like 50 to 70 women in a giant cell, probably the size of this room. Just packed in on bunk beds. And so that was hard to see, but along with that, what was also difficult to see was the fact that we brought like care packages to hand out. They opened the cells so they could come out and see us to hand them out. There's like 20 of us and like 70 of them. And so again, what am I feeling? Lost, abandoned, scared, because we could just be on the next like prison riot. Like, here's 20 Americans, have fun. But it didn't end up like that. It was a great time. It was humbling, to say the least, and an experience that, though it was terrifying, was very good. But it made me feel like an outsider. It made me feel alone. I felt like I had, been abandoned. Though there was a group of us, it was like, I felt like I was the only one there. And I'm sure many of you have felt that way, have felt these feelings of being alone and scared, probably not in a women's prison in a third world country, but in some fashion, you've probably felt these, even worthless, not valuable to anybody. And if you've ever felt that way before, you're not alone. I have felt that way before. I'm sure other people in this room, leaders, would say that they felt that way before. Honestly, as Christians, we probably already feel that way a little bit because the world around us is not the biggest fan of who we are. But tonight I want to look at the story of Zacchaeus and look at how Jesus reached out to him in their interaction to make him from an outsider to an insider. What he did to show him love, to show him, make him feel important and connected in the kingdom of God. And not only for this, but how it's going to apply for us to be able to do that for the community around us. So if you happen to have a Bible, which I don't think one around, so if you do happen to have a Bible on you or a phone or something, we're in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. The slide or the verses will also be on the slides behind me. And a fun fact, as you're flipping there or scrolling there, the city of Jericho. Where else have you heard the story of the city? Like, where else have you heard about Jericho? Just quick question. Where else have you heard about Jericho? I involve some trumpets. Anybody? Okay. Cool.
I think there was a wall.
Yeah, there was a wall.
Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho.
Yeah. Yeah, the walls came down, and there it is. All right, claps all around. Woo! All right, anyway, so Jericho has come back again in this story. So starting in Luke chapter 19, verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus, and he was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. The crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass by that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, "Quick, come down, I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. "He has gone to be a guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham." So in the story, we read that Jesus has come through Jericho and has changed this guy's life, this guy Zacchaeus, this outsider. Now, most of the time when you hear this story or sing the song, you climbed up the sycamore tree for the Lord you wanted to see. Maybe you don't know that. Maybe I'm just exposing my age. But I'm old, me too. But there's more behind this story. Like, if you ever had a dream inside a dream, one of those crazy things, you watched a movie that kind of followed that same plot line. Here, there's a story within a story. That's what we're going to look at with this, because it's about a man who was lost, who was an outsider, who was hated by the people in his own town. Now, as we read, Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector, and a tax collector is someone who would obviously come and collect taxes, as the name says, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious and simple. But the reason that they were so hated, and still kind of hard to this day, is they would have to take more tax than they were supposed to, and they would pocket some for their own selves. So let's say you have 2 skills, right? And you like skills. You have 2 skills. All right, but then the tax collector comes by and he's like, "Okay, I need 1 skill for taxes, and then I get another skill for myself." And you have to give him both skills, and then what are you left with those skills? You're going to not like the guy because he took all your skills, right? It's disappointing. So that's why he was a hated man. He just took more than what they were supposed to. Now, needless to say, they were disliked. But along with that, he was left to be lost and alone. Because of this dislike from the people around him in the crowd and the town, he was left to live his own life. And yet what we see is that Jesus was able to provide life change in Zacchaeus' life, because all he did was reach out to him and show him love. Because he stepped into his life and was like, "Hey, you're worth something. Let me show you why. Let me make you feel why, teach you why." And in the end, he gave up everything that he had, turned his life around, and returned money back to the people. Everybody got their Skittles back, basically. And he followed Jesus. So in this same way, we want to follow the same pattern. How do we do that? How do we reach out to the outsiders and make them feel like insiders? How do we impact the world around us? First point on your handout is to go out of our way. We have to go out of our way to reach the outsiders. Looking back at verse 1, it says, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. Now, reading that again, it doesn't sound like anything super exciting, right? I think he went to the town and passed through Jericho. Like, nothing crazy here. But what is actually crazy and makes this an interesting point is that, so Jesus was on his final journey. Here's my little map, it's not trying to scale. Jesus was on his final journey from Galilee. Okay, so he's up here. He was heading for Jerusalem. So what he could have done, this is not a bad marker. I'm good. So what he could have done is walk straight to Jerusalem, right? We see that on the map. I looked at an actual map, I'm not just making this up. He could have walked straight to Jerusalem. What he did, however, was head out and around through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. Now, to us, that might not seem like a big deal because we have cars, so an extra 75 miles is, just a little bit, some extra minutes, but like it's nothing super crazy. We can still get it done in a day. For him, they were walking, so this is like an extra week's time. This is a big deal that he went out of his way to pass through Jericho. But he did this because he knew somebody needed him. He knew there was an outsider that needed to be made an insider. He went with a purpose because there was a guy that needed someone to come after him. And so no matter the cost, he did what he had to do. And he loved Zacchaeus by doing this for him and going out of his own way. So in the same way, this is what we need to do. We need to get out of our own way to love the outsider. This could be sitting with the awkward kid at lunch. This could be studying with the quiet person in your class that nobody hangs out with. This could be inviting someone over to your house that never goes, or inviting someone with your friend group to the mall. It's these simple things in our everyday lives that we can do to include people, to include the outsider, to make them feel loved. It takes you getting out of your comfort zone and your way of convenience, which might be a little difficult, but it's something that you can do. That's why we're talking about this today. You all have the ability to do that, just to get out of your way and love the outsider. But along with that, we also have to use their name. That's the second point on your handout, is to use their name. So looking back, Jesus goes through the town, sees Zacchaeus in a tree. And as it says in verse 5, when Jesus came by, he looked at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said. Jesus sees Zacchaeus up in this tree, chilling out, trying to, that'd be kind of crazy to see a guy up in a tree already, right? So, in thinking back, remember, Zacchaeus is a lonely guy. Nobody likes him. So thinking, this would be the first time he's heard his name in a while, or used in a nice context. They were probably not using some very nice words to refer to him, because he was once again hated. Judah Smith says in a quote, "They say the sweetest sound to a human being's ears is the sound of his or her own name." When Jesus started this conversation with Zacchaeus, he started by calling his name. And there's some science and psychology that goes behind this when calling someone's name. But when we hear our name, our brain registers that someone needs our attention. That's why I like when you're narcotic people, when someone calls your name, yes, that's me. You start to feel important, right? Because you're like, somebody wants me. Somebody needs me. I'm seen. I'm here. And so when we hear names, when we use names, this signifies importance for people. And in John chapter 1, verse 42, it says, Jesus looked intently at Peter and told him, "While your name is Simon, I'm going to call you Peter." Peter means rock or stone. And if you know the book of Acts, you know that Peter gave his first sermon for the church, or of the church, and is considered the cornerstone for its beginning. Jesus knows the power of names. And when we use names, like I said, it shows the value of a person. So when we have interactions with people, use their name, call them by name. And if you don't know it, learn their name. Okay, no, I don't know the name, what do I say? Learn it, introduce yourself. Become their friend, which leads us to our third point, which is to be their friend. We need to be friends with the outsider. Again, looking back at Luke chapter 19, verse 5, it says, when Jesus came by, he looked at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Jesus tells Zacchaeus to quickly come down and invites himself over to his house. Like, it's kind of bold, isn't it? To invite yourself over to somebody's house. Now, maybe you have one of those friendships where it's like, that's kind of the deal, where you just like show up and walk in the door and head straight for the refrigerator. You know, one of those, like, those are some pretty cool friendships, right? Especially when they have better food at their house. Or like they got like sparkling water at their house. That's always very exciting. But he was bold. He invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house, and you can probably think or feel the excitement that Zacchaeus is probably feeling about this, because he's like, wait. You want to live in my house? Like my house, my place, me. You're inviting me over. Okay, I don't know if I cleaned it. I cleaned it. Should we order Domino's, Papa John's? You can like pizza, you gluten free. Like he's probably just like all this stuff is running through his mind, and he's like, oh my goodness, somebody wants me. He called me out. He's coming over my house. Like he's going from an outsider to an insider. He's starting to feel this completeness and this love and this acceptance. And yet this was the man that was universally despised by people, and Jesus still went to his house. So in the same way, we need to show friendship to the outsider, to the outcast person. Now, it's fairly simple to say that we can do the first 2 points. Someone's saying that's not always super difficult. The difficult point and the challenging point is when you have to be their friends, when you have to enter into a relationship with them. Now, I'm not saying that you need to become their best friend and you guys are bros for life or sisters forever, but you need to build some kind of rapport with them, some kind of friendship level. Because if you don't do that, what kind of impact are you going to have on their life? If you invite someone here, so let's say, Ben always talks about inviting your friends to youth group. Okay, you do that, but then you don't hang out with them the rest of the night. How are they going to feel when they leave? Are they going to feel accepted, seen, and loved? Or left alone, abandoned, and despised? That's why this is such an important point, is to be friends with the outsider. You got to do those 2 steps. You got to follow up with the rest to really bring them into relationship and acceptance. You have to be intentional with them. And along with being a friend of the outsider, the universally despised person, because maybe the outsider that you need to reach out to is someone that is not very well liked in your school or community. Yet they deserve the same love that we get from Jesus. Everybody deserves Jesus' love. So, but don't worry about what other people think, what they're going to say. Obviously, as we saw, Jesus still went to Zacchaeus' house, and we saw how cranky they were about it. He still did it. In Matthew chapter 9, verses 10 through 12, it says, later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? When Jesus heard this, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. Right? He's like calling them out. But Matthew was a tax collector just like Zacchaeus. And what did we learn about tax collectors? They weren't well liked. And yet Jesus asked Matthew to follow him, to be his disciple, to come into relationship with him, to become an insider. And Matthew left being a tax collector and became that disciple. Can't talk. And the Pharisees were just like the people in the story of Zacchaeus as we read, grumbling and upset, and yet Jesus responded back to this. That sick people, that healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. Because why would you go to the doctor if you're feeling all right, right? I mean, I know they do wellness checkups, but like, do you really need to go, like, if you're feeling okay? And in Luke chapter 19, verse 10, as we read ahead in this story, it says, for the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. So why is Jesus friends with the lost? It's because it's his mission. That's why he reached out to Matthew. That's why the disreputable sinners were hanging out. That's why he reached out to Zacchaeus and invited himself over for dinner. Because Jesus came to heal and to fix and to save the lost. He interacted with them and brought them into belonging and into spirit and into relationship with him. And I believe that if we would do this, we would see life change. Like, it's one thing to come to youth group and sit on your bum, hear the lesson, chat in small group real quick and head out. And it's another thing to then to do all that, to head out those doors, invite some people, bring them through the doors, show them what it means to be in the kingdom of Christ, to have faith and relationship with Jesus, and fill this room brim to brim. That's what we want. That's what we should be doing. That's what Jesus is doing here, is reaching out to everybody. So yes, invite your friends that you already know, your best friends that might not go to a church. That's perfectly fine, and yes, you should be doing that. But at the same time, you can't ignore the people that are forgotten in the hallways at school or sitting by themselves at the lunch table, because they deserve the exact same amount of love that Jesus gives for them and us. But how are they going to experience that if no one does anything? If we just keep walking by and letting them be an outsider. There could be future pastors, future children's ministry leaders, future just youth volunteers. So different futures for people walking through your life right now, and all they need is for you to step in and show them the love of Jesus so that they can pursue that calling. But how is that going to happen if you're still sitting on your butt? How's that going to happen if you're not getting out of your comfort zone and talking to them, using their name and becoming their friend? I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not standing up here saying that this is perfect and that I do it perfect either. I was learning just as much as we are now, studying through this. But if we just sit here and then do nothing about it, what good was it? There's a world of people out there that need the love of God and that need us to do that, to bring them into relationship, to bring them from being an outsider to being an insider, to love the outsider. That's our purpose, is to love the outsider, to fill this room with outsiders, to become insiders. And thinking back to the story here above, just think what would have happened to Zacchaeus if Jesus hadn't come through town. Jesus hadn't come through it all. Jesus didn't take this long route out, pass on through. He just went on to Jerusalem. He would have still been despised, rejected, left alone, hated by his people, probably not living a life for God, and then done. We want to put it on the brink of defeat. Yet Jesus did what he needed to do to reach out to him, and that's what I am trying to communicate to you tonight, is to reach out to the people around you. If that's something that you're not sure how to do, you're still uncomfortable with, talk to one of us, talk to your small group leader, talk to Ben. We can come up with tools, ways to do it. There's so many ways to reach out to people. If you are super comfortable with it but haven't done it yet, start doing it. You can do it. That's why we're talking about this. Because I believe that each and every one of you can do it, or we wouldn't have talked about this. But because I believe that, that's why we're sharing this tonight. You all have the power and the ability to impact the world around you. It just takes getting out of your way, using their name, becoming friends with the outsider. It takes loving the outsider, just like Jesus loved Zacchaeus. Pray with me real quick. God, I pray for this group of students in here tonight. I pray for those that are not here tonight, God, that you would stir our hearts for your kingdom, that you would stir our hearts for a relationship with you, but also for the ones that are not here, for the ones that are not here, that need you, God. I pray that we would impact the world around us for you, through you, God. And that we would see outsiders becoming insiders. I pray for small groups as we go to those, that those will be productive times, great times of sharing and connecting with each other, God. And I just pray as we leave this place that this would not leave our hearts, that you would not leave our hearts, but you go with us and just give us an awesome week ahead. So in your name I pray, God. Amen. With that, I can leave the